Hello, everybody. It is 11 o'clock Mountain Time, so let's get this webinar started. Hello, and thank you for joining us online today for Mike Goffin's presentation entitled Protecting Canada's Fresh Water, Creating a Canada Water Agency. My name is Stephanie Strike, and I'm the Operations Coordinator for the Canada Water Resources Association. Sean Douglas, past president of the CWRA, is also on the line with us today, and he will be covering the question period of this webinar. Just a few notes before we begin the presentation. We are recording the presentation, and it will be posted afterwards on the CWRA website and YouTube channel. Everyone who registered will also receive a copy of the recording tomorrow in an email. We will be taking questions for this presentation after Mike has finished. If you have a question or comment at any time, please type it into the question tab on your control panel. And finally, during the talk, I'm going to post a few social media and website links in case you want to follow up with the talk. So check your dashboard questions heading for those. Now, a quick introduction. In 2020, Mr. Goffin took on a special assignment as Director General, Water Policy, with an Environment and Climate Change Canada, responsible for the creation of the Canada Water Agency. Over the course of his more than 30-year career in the public service of Canada, Mr. Goffin has been engaged in policy to develop and deliver programs in areas which include environmental protection, wildlife management, meteorology, water and ecosystem management, intergovernmental affairs, and community outreach and engagement. For more than a decade, Mr. Goffin has been responsible for leading Canada's efforts to restore and protect the water quality and ecosystem health of the Great Lakes, and in 2012, he was lead negotiator for Canada, responsible for the negotiation of the Canada-United States Great Lakes Water Quality Agreement. Mr. Goffin has been a long-serving member of the International Joint Commission's Great Lakes Water Quality Board, and also currently serves as Canadian co-chair for the International Joint Commission's International Rainy Lakes of the Woods Watershed Board. Mr. Goffin received his undergraduate training in environmental studies from the University of Toronto and a Master's of Science degree in geomorphology, also from the University of Toronto. Thank you for presenting with us today. Mike, take it away.
Okay, thank you. Thank you to everyone for joining us. I'm just going to go quickly through the slide deck and then happy to answer any questions that folks might have. So maybe we can go to slide 2. There we go. So just briefly, the Prime Minister has directed the Minister of Environment and Climate Change Canada to create a Canada Water Agency. In turn, the Minister has asked his Parliamentary Secretary, Terry Duguid, to champion this project. The commitment was recently reiterated in the speech from the throne. The agency will work with provincial and territorial governments, Indigenous people, local authorities, and others to find the best ways to keep our fresh water safe, clean, and well managed. The specific roles and structures of the agency have not yet been determined. Importantly, the agency will be designed to not encroach on provincial and territorial jurisdiction over fresh water. Rather, it'll be developed to be collaborative and add value. Go to the next slide, please. I'm frequently asked why the government's making this commitment at this time, and I think the drivers behind the commitment to create the agency are readily apparent. And they start with the fact that Canada is blessed with a significant supply of fresh water. Fresh water is, of course, vitally important to our health, our economy, and our environment. But when it comes to managing our fresh water, there are significant challenges. The next slide, please. First, freshwater management is a shared responsibility between the Government of Canada, provinces and territories, Indigenous governments, and while there are many examples of coordination mechanisms working across jurisdictions presents numerous challenges. Within the federal government alone, there are more than 20 departments and agencies which have responsibilities linked to some aspect of freshwater management. And we don't consistently or effectively engage Indigenous people in freshwater management decision-making. Interjurisdictional freshwater management is a particular challenge. Next slide, please. There are significant freshwater quality challenges. Often these differ from region to region within Canada. Many of them are exacerbated by the effects of climate change. One such issue is the problem of toxic and nuisance algae, which in Lake Erie alone is estimated to cost the Canadian economy $5.3 billion over the next 30 years if not addressed. Next slide. The costs of drought and flood are staggering and increased due to climate change. The Government of Canada pays out an average of $750 million annually in disaster relief due to flooding, and droughts can cost billions of dollars in lost agricultural production. Next slide. Many aquatic ecosystems are under stress due to land use changes, contaminants, nutrient pollution, aquatic invasive species, and other factors. And all aquatic ecosystems are and will continue to be impacted by climate change. Next slide, please. So it's in recognition of these challenges that the Government of Canada is committed to creating a Canada Water Agency. We've begun by examining current federal programming and looking broadly at a range of freshwater management issues. We've also reached out to provinces and territories, to national Indigenous organizations, to stakeholders in the public to collect initial thoughts on potential roles for a Canada Water Agency. Next slide. Early engagement has also included creation of a place speak site where Canadians can go to provide their thoughts on freshwater priorities and potential roles for the agency, and the link is being provided in the meeting materials. To date, more than 6,000 people have visited the site, demonstrating a significant interest in this topic. What we've heard is a significant interest in a broad range of freshwater issues and associated with these potential roles for the Canada Water Agency. So just to give you an idea of some of the common themes that we're hearing back from all of the groups that we have talked to, from the provinces and territories, as well as the public, as well as some initial engagement with Indigenous people. The need for improving understanding and adaptation to climate impacts on freshwater is one of the themes that we hear most frequently. Also, enhancing coordination federally with provinces and territories, with water experts, and with key sectors such as agriculture. Improving freshwater science and data, advancing interjurisdictional freshwater management, and increasing participation of Indigenous people in freshwater management decision-making are all common themes. Next slide, please. Rather than jump immediately to creation of the agency, our approach has been to start by taking a step back and examining freshwater challenges facing Canada. Our objective has been to identify gaps and opportunities for better management of fresh water in relation to these challenges. And then from this list of gaps and opportunities, we'll ask which are best suited to be addressed through a federal Canada Water Agency and how. Next slide. One of the messages that we've heard through our early engagement is that freshwater is such a large subject that it makes meaningful discussion of a Canada Water Agency roles and responsibilities difficult. As a consequence, we've decided that we'll develop a discussion document, and we'll use that discussion document as the basis for in-depth engagement with provinces and territories, Indigenous people, stakeholders, and the public. We'll also conduct expert engagement sessions on the topic of freshwater science and data to determine priorities and opportunities in these areas. Following the in-depth engagement on the discussion paper, we'll return to Cabinet for a decision on mandate and structure of the agency, before proceeding with agency creation. Currently, we're on track to release the discussion paper later this year with in-depth engagement to extend into the first part of next calendar year. No date has yet been established for when the agency will become operational. What I can say is that we're moving forward as quickly as we can, but recognize the need to allow sufficient time for full and effective engagement. So that brings me to the end of my brief presentation. I'm happy to try and answer any questions you might have, and I'd encourage you all to visit the PlaySpeak site to provide your initial thoughts. We will be using that PlaySpeak site to post the discussion document and allow for more in-depth comments at that time. So with that, I'm open to questions.
So this is Sean Douglas. So some questions are coming in. So what I'll do is I'll just kind of go through the questions as they are coming in. And the Mike can address, either answer them or direct you to where you need to go here. So just 1 second here. The first, there's a pair of questions. One is a statement, one is a question from Hugh Whiteley. It says all fresh water in Canada arrives as precipitation. This input is controlled by global atmospheric movement and ocean currents. Management of this aspect of fresh water is a federal government responsibility, I'm assuming from a climate change perspective. Will the Canadian Water Agency take responsibility for accurate measurement of precipitation as needed to manage the terrestrial fresh water?
So, certainly that whole continuum from measuring precipitation to predicting, modeling, developing decision support tools to allow people to make better adaptive management decisions and decisions regarding important issues such as drought and flood are one of the topics that we're looking at closely. As I said during the presentation, we haven't identified specific mandate and roles for the agency, but that's certainly one of the topics that we've been doing a bit of a deep dive into to understand where the gaps are and what the opportunities might be. One of the challenges in relation to that particular issue is that Canada does have the Meteorological Service of Canada right now doing that type of work. And so how the agency fits in with existing structures in the federal government is going to be one of those topics that we're going to have to work through. We're following a form follows function approach to determining what the agency's structure will actually end up being. So first identify the gaps and opportunities and then decide how best to fill those, and which can be best filled through an agency are part of that process.
Okay, the next question here is from Will Dubitsky. I suggest that the impacts of motorboats be included in the mandate. There are serious implications for shoreline erosion and sediment suspension.
So that's that's part of the job of identifying gaps and opportunities. Again, the agency isn't meant to encroach on other jurisdictions. It's meant to add value. So often issues such as wake management are more of an issue at the local or possibly provincial and territorial levels. But again, the process we're following is to consider all issues as they're raised to our attention and then work through that process.
All right, the next question is from Stephanie Allard. I'd like to know why the government has chosen to restrict itself only to fresh water. Managing water as a whole as an integrated system allows us to better understand the impact of certain decisions in fresh water on the maritime sector.
So two thoughts there. One is one of the challenges that we're looking at is that managing water in an integrated way makes sense. I think almost everyone would agree. But the way that jurisdictions are divided sometimes creates challenges to that. So we're looking in depth at how we better coordinate, how we integrate our decision-making and management approaches. And we've heard from, you know, a wide array of people that there are opportunities for improvement. So definitely an issue. The particular issue around freshwater to saltwater and the connections there is one of those issues that we're also looking at. So our mandate is to create an agency to manage Canada's freshwater resources, but freshwater resources impact marine ecosystems. And so that's an issue that we'll be looking at through our, I think I mentioned in the presentation there, we'll be doing a separate detailed look at science and data issues. And I think better understanding how freshwater impacts on marine ecosystems is one of those areas that we'll be discussing through that process.
Okay, the next question is from Julian Walker. Will the agency include hydrometric monitoring, or will that stay in ECCC?
So you're breaking up a little bit there, but I think the question was, with hydrometric monitoring, would it be done in the agency or would it remain in Environment and Climate Change Canada?
That's the question,
yeah. If that's the question. Well, again, the structure and mandate of the agency haven't been decided, and that'll be a step in the process. Once we've identified opportunities to enhance freshwater management, the next question will be, how do you structure an agency, and what skills and what roles and responsibilities do you need to make that operational? So right now, you know, the Hydrometric Service and Environment Climate Change Canada has roles and responsibilities that it's effectively delivering, and the real question is, how does that fit into the overall picture? But we're not there yet. So those will be topics that we'll address through the in-depth engagement.
All right, the next one here is one of the biggest threats of water resources in Canada is salt that is used in winter for melting the snow and goes to the rivers and lakes. What is the solution and protection activities related to this?
Right. Well, I'm not going to try and get into specific issues, but what I can say is that's a good example of where responsibilities are divided between the Government of Canada and provinces and territories. And so I think on an issue like that, you know, one of the lines of inquiry that we're pursuing as we think about a Canada Water Agency is an issue like that well coordinated? Are there good coordinating mechanisms to ensure that that is effectively addressed? And if not, could a Canada Water Agency help in that regard? So that's a good example of just working through each issue and looking for opportunities to do a better job of managing our freshwater.
Right. What are your thoughts on watersheds or river basins as a basis for institutional arrangements, bringing stakeholders to the table, and how the new agency could support these?
It's a topic that's come up frequently as we've talked to people through the initial engagement process. So I mentioned that we had touched base with provinces and territories and national Indigenous organizations. I mentioned the Place Speaks site. The Parliamentary Secretary has also maintained a virtual open door policy throughout this process, and has met with a large number of stakeholder groups and water experts. And I'd say that that's a topic of watershed management, and how the agency could support that is a topic that comes up frequently. So a couple of ideas. So one of the suggestions that I've heard is that the agency could promote integrated water resource management, watershed-based management, best practices, innovation, and communicate that nationally. The other topic that's come up frequently in relation to watershed management is the issue of managing interjurisdictional waters. So waters which cross provincial and territorial boundaries, or which cross the Canada-US boundary. And so making sure that we have the proper cooperation, the proper governance mechanisms in place to manage those particular watershed challenges. So again, those are two ideas that we'll be exploring further. We'll address those in that discussion document that I mentioned, and we'll be seeking input on those.
Okay, this is a similar question to some other ones, and it's around organizational structure with departments. And so this is similar to another one, but you may have a different comment. You mentioned the agency incorporating elements of Environment Canada, climate change, and Ag Canada. Will elements of fisheries also be in scope?
Yeah, I think any elements are in scope, but those are going to be topics that we're going to have to work through. They're going to be difficult decisions. Right now, I think in the presentation, I mentioned that there are more than 20 federal departments and agencies that have some aspect of freshwater management. Of that, there's probably a smaller number, maybe 10, that have significant federal freshwater roles. And we're very conscious that as we move to create an agency, we have to look at not only what we're creating, but what we're leaving behind. So if we were to take some of those responsibilities out of existing departments and move them into the agency, if we were to take resources and expertise out of those departments and move them into the agency, what does that do for the delivery of the mandates and the responsibilities of those other departments? So that's going to be part of that process. I think first it's identify the opportunities. Next is to ask which could be effectively delivered through the agency, and then third is how do we structure that agency, and how do we do that while being aware of the impact that we could have on existing organizations. So it's going to take a while to work through those steps, and it's not a simple thing. For those of us who are dyed-in-the-wool water people, the idea of creating an agency and bringing resources together is very attractive. But I think we have to be cognizant that there are other important topics, and that some of that expertise that we're thinking could be moved into the agency also serves other responsibilities of the government of Canada. And so we'll just have to work through that.
Okay, I'm going to skip over some of the questions that are related to, are you including a specific topic in scope of the agency? Because I assume that through the Play Speak and other venues, that'll be the nature of the agency in terms of determining scope, what's in scope and what's out of scope, right? So I'm going to ask some more broader questions here, and if we have time, I'll come back to the other ones. So can you comment on how the agency might be structured to provide federal coordination and leadership on a policy direction that can be overlain on activities happening at various departments and levels of government? I'm assuming provincial and municipal, et cetera. Hopefully we'll see a national water policy updated in the near future as a result.
Yeah, that's a big question. So maybe start with the federal family alone. I mean, one of the things that we're looking closely at is what are the coordinating mechanisms in place just to work across those 20 plus federal departments that I mentioned that do play a role in freshwater management. Not surprisingly, there is no single overarching coordinating mechanism, and that's maybe one of the challenges that we face in freshwater management at the federal level. So there are good coordinating mechanisms on individual aspects of freshwater management. There are a number of them, but the question is, does the government of Canada need better coordination across all departments on fresh water, and could an agency provide that? We have looked at the federal water policy that was mentioned in the question. When that policy came in 1987, it provided a coordinating framework. So it was a statement of the government's priorities and ambitions on fresh water, and an interdepartmental committee at the federal level was created to coordinate implementation of the policy across departments. That no longer exists. So that's one of the issues that we're looking at. It also speaks to what the structure of that agency could be. So, conceivably, a small agency could be created with a role of coordinating across existing organizations. Alternatively, there are people who would support more of a doer role for the agency, so bringing those responsibilities into the agency rather than coordinating them where they currently rest. So those, again, are the issues that we're going to have to work through. I guess similarly, we could say that there are a number of mechanisms for coordinating across federal, provincial, and territorial governments. The principal mechanism for a large number of environmental issues is Canada Council of Ministries of the Environment, CCME. But not all provincial and territorial ministries that have responsibility for all aspects of freshwater management are represented at that table. Again, conceivably, the agency could look at whether there are other mechanisms that need to be created to enhance that coordination. And again, that's one of the topics we're going to want to engage on and ask what would be the most efficient and effective way of doing that. I've also heard a lot of comments that there's just a need to bring water people together to actually have discussions on fresh water. And I know that this organization does that, but maybe there's a role for the federal government in helping to convene and support some of those discussions moving forward.
All right, here I'm just reading through some of the questions. You've answered a couple of the next ones in a row here. So the next one here is, in addition to considering the place speak comments, will the government be reaching out to stakeholders, for example, provincial groundwater associations, or I guess for that matter, CWRA, since you're talking here, as part of its in-depth engagement?
Well, as I mentioned, the parliamentary secretary has maintained a virtual open door policy and met with a large number of organizations. We're definitely interested in hearing from anyone who wants to talk to us. We will be organizing a number of workshops to engage on that discussion paper. Those will be happening later this year or early next year. Right now, there's not a plan to engage specific organizations moving forward, although there will be that in-depth engagement of water experts around freshwater science and freshwater data management.
Okay, so the next question is, I guess it's around the scope of the water agency again, but it's a little bit different from some of the previous ones. So to what degree will there be coordination internationally or internally in Canada and with our neighbors to the south to map the continuity of aquifer systems and provide an inventory of groundwater volumes and the amounts used and how sustainability will be maintained?
Yeah, it's a good question. It's one of those areas that's come up as a gap or an opportunity, depending on how you want to frame that. The whole issue of transboundary water management and how we integrate data, how we coordinate science, how we coordinate governance and action has come up. aquifers, groundwater is a special area, sometimes we're further advanced in terms of our governance mechanisms in relation to surface water. We have the International Joint Commission, and we have a number of agreements between Canada and the US, but not as well developed when it comes to groundwater. So that's one of those areas that has come up through our initial engagement as an opportunity to do better. So I don't know if that fully answers the question, but I think that it's definitely an issue that's been raised.
Okay, the next question is similar to a previous question, but it's a bit more specific, and I guess you could comment too in terms of the provincial and the provincial boundaries, because there's boundaries everywhere, and I think that's kind of the challenge here. And so, what would the territorial scale of the Canadian Water Agency be? For example, in a watershed, is a watershed approach considered, and what scale of watershed is considered? And you kind of spoke to that before, but I think this is really around maybe some pre-thinkings about, you know, how the water agency itself would be structured as a go forward from a management or policy perspective.
Right. Well, maybe what I can say is that you know, one of the issues that has gotten a fair bit of discussion is the regional nature of a number of freshwater challenges, so that the priorities in one part of the country are different than the priorities in another when it comes to freshwater management, or the challenges are different. And so as we develop the agency, one of those key questions is, to what extent should it have a regional focus? Should the agency be structured in such of a way, or have a mandate to address those regional issues? People will notice that the mandate commitment was actually given to the Minister of the Environment and Climate Change and the Minister of Agriculture and Agri-Food Canada. That in itself showed an interest in some of those regional dynamics. So first, that agriculture is a sector which is a large user of water. It's a sector which is impacted significantly by drought in particular, but also by flooding at times. But it was also a recognition that the prairies are one of those regions that have a special challenge. And so it is conceivable that this Canada Water Agency could have a mandate to develop a regional focus, regional elements to its work moving forward. And again, that's one of those issues that we'll want to take advice on through the discussion paper process.
All right, and I guess a bit further on that, with the regional focus are different boundaries, but will the agency have a mandate to develop and enforce legislation, policy, or regulations, either federally or at the provincial or regional level? And how has the Canada Water Act been considered during the work completed to date?
So a couple of things there. One is that we don't have a mandate to develop new legislation. You know, the mandate commitment was clear. It was to create an agency to work cooperatively with provinces and territories and Indigenous people and others. Right now, we don't see the agency as having a regulatory component. But again, we're open to discussion as we move through the consultative process. Certainly not looking to. I think in the question there was reference to regulation at a provincial or local level. We're certainly not looking to encroach on the jurisdiction of provinces and territories or municipalities. And they all have their own regulatory structures. But if there was value added that could be provided in terms of freshwater management through guidance on regulation or best practices or sharing information, you know, all of those could be considered.
All right. this one is similar trend, actually, just a little bit different look at it. Can we see, or could we think in the possibility of seeing the Canadian Water Agency negotiating with Indigenous peoples as a co-management in a co-management agreement?
You know, definitely. One of the special areas that we're going to want to look at in depth is engagement of Indigenous people in freshwater management and decision making. And we're very interested in understanding Indigenous people's interests in freshwater and how we can work more effectively with them. So that will definitely be a special area of interest as we move through that discussion paper process. And I mentioned we have had initial contact with national Indigenous organizations. We're seeking their advice on how we should engage Indigenous people further as we move through this process.
All right. The next question is, I guess, coordination with other activities. I'm not sure what one of the acronyms means. It's what do you see as the connection between the GLWQA, which is Great Lakes Water Quality something, and the COA agreements and the Canadian Water Agency?
So I'll take a guess that it might be the Water Quality Agreement and the Canada-Ontario Agreement for Great Lakes water quality and ecosystem health. Both of those I was and am involved in negotiating. I think that you know, the work that the Government of Canada does on some of the large lakes, so not just the Great Lakes, but Lake Winnipeg, also involved on the St. Lawrence, on the St. John. Those are dedicated ecosystem-focused programs. Those are being considered as part of that identification of gaps and opportunities as we move through the Canada Water Agency. And like all other activities in the Government of Canada related to fresh water, they are being considered as potential topics as we move forward. So are there opportunities to do better, to manage better, and could they be effectively delivered through a Canada Water Agency model? There are also, you know, good examples of that regional focus that we talked about earlier. So sometimes specifically designed programming to address regional freshwater concerns is the most effective way of addressing a problem. Last thing that I'll say on this topic is that there is a separate mandate commitment for the Minister of Environment and Climate Change Canada, and that is to provide further protection to the Great Lakes, Lake Winnipeg, Lake Simcoe, and other large lakes. And so that is being pursued. We're doing that in parallel with the work to establish a Canada Water Agency, and we'll be looking for interlinkages between those two.
Okay, here. So you talked about the water agency having a coordination role. The next question has to do with, I guess, taking it a bit further. And so does the Canada Water Agency have plans to also take on an advocacy role for things such as water policy and compliance? Well,
I guess what I'd say is that, you know, the agency will be an agency of the Government of Canada. So to that extent, I don't use the word advocacy. Maybe splitting hairs, but I'd say that I do hope the agency will be a champion for fresh water, and that it will bring people together to discuss important freshwater management challenges in Canada and identify best practices and promote and support those practices. So I'm not sure if that's advocacy as much as championing a forward agenda. I think it's a real opportunity to have that discussion to identify key freshwater challenges and then work across jurisdictions to make sure we are doing the best job possible to address those.
Okay, do you, with respect to the Canada Water Agency, is there any example of another country, I guess, that has got regional management of its resources like Canada that has set up a national water agency, like in a similar fashion to help coordinate the activities across the country?
Yeah, it's an excellent question. So it is one of those lines of inquiry that we've initiated, is to look at other models. There are a large number of water agencies in other countries. What I would say is that our investigation shows that they're all rather different. Some are different because governance operates differently in those countries. Some are different because they are focused on particular water challenges, or were created in response to particular water challenges. We've looked in detail, for example, at Australia, which created a water agency in response to significant challenges that country has faced. But we are looking at all of those. We will include a discussion of some of those international models when we bring forward that discussion paper. And again, with the notion that form follows function, we want to work through what the priorities for roles and responsibilities for a Canada Water Agency would be, and then be able to consider those in relation to the international models that are out there. We also have some good models in Canada. So we've been in touch with the Saskatchewan Water Agency, for example, and understanding how they dealt with this issue of how to structure in order to deliver on freshwater responsibilities in that province. So lots of models that we have to learn from.
All right. Could you, Canadian Water Agency could support a greater participation of Indigenous peoples in water governance. How big is the CWA umbrella, and is it going to be a policy shop, or is there room for science and Indigenous co-development of science programming moving forward?
I think the potential is definitely there to have that big umbrella. So again, there's been no decisions on either roles or structure of the agency, and so we'll work through that. In relation to Indigenous engagement, though, I think that's an obvious priority that we're going to need to walk through, and how the agency, not whether, but how the agency can support greater engagement of Indigenous people in freshwater management.
Okay. The next one has to do with different jurisdictions, and you've kind of talked about it a little bit, but I guess this is, maybe you can comment on where you see the Canada Water Agency going in an issue like this. It says, in terms of water quality, will there be unified federal standards considering the transboundary waters between provinces, or will each province have its own standards?
Again, that's one of those issues that I've heard raised a number of times. It's definitely one of those topics that we're going to want to seek advice on. It's certainly an option. But again, we haven't made those types of decisions yet.
And I guess if you could just comment further, I'll lead you a little bit, but I assume these are the types of questions why you're looking at the development of a Canada Water Agency.
It could well be. So yeah. I mean, really, again, the whole design of the process is first ask what the issue is, what's the gap, what do we need and we don't have, or what's the opportunity to do better, and then to consult on whether people agree that we should move in that way. Ultimately, the agency wants to be collaborative, so we want to develop consensus on the path forward of how we can manage better, and ultimately we want to be value added. We want the work of the agency to improve freshwater management in Canada.
Okay, can you provide an update on the federal water law and policy review undertaken by the Standing Committee on Environment and Sustainable Development?
I can't. I'm sorry. So there are a couple of things going on. There is a motion looking at the Canada Water Act currently, and a decision is needed on when and how to proceed on that motion. I guess whether, when and how. In terms of the federal water policy, it has been raised, as I mentioned before, a number of times in terms of a potential tool that, a renewed federal water policy could be an effective tool to coordinate action moving forward. But that's as far as I can go.
Okay, maybe, James, maybe you can forward, if that didn't answer your question, it seems kind of specific, you can forward the question on to as part of the webinar after. We can see if we can follow up on that. Okay, are there any examples of existing federal agencies in Canada or internationally that you're looking at for guidance in designing a new agency? I think you kind of dealt, that is related to, are there other groups, other countries that have done similar things?
So we've looked at other countries, but the way I interpret that question, there are other agencies within the government of Canada, and so we have looked at some of those models as well. That speaks more to machinery of government and how government works, but you can see different models in terms of whether they are coordinating mechanisms versus science mechanisms, science-based organizations with internal expertise, how they relate to provinces and territories, how they engage with Indigenous people. So there are a number of lessons learned by looking at those other agencies federally, and again, that's part of our process.
Okay, skipping a couple here, you've answered them already. Usually water management is centered on the amount and quality of water to meet human needs. Are concerns surrounding ecological flow needs a topic being considered for this agency, particularly the cumulative effects on our rivers from various human activities?
Yeah, again, we've cast this very broadly to be all freshwater management issues, and so that is a topic that has come up. At some point we're going to have to talk about priorities and focus of an agency, and but right now we're looking very broadly at all of those issues. So definitely something that we've looked at and we'll be talking more about in the discussion paper.
Okay, and you have answered questions about changing existing policies and legislation and things like that, and at this point that isn't the intent, right?
I think it's fair though for people to provide advice on those topics. So our focus is definitely on creating the Canada Water Agency. But if people have advice on federal water policy, Canada Water Act, other legislation, I think it's fair to bring that forward, and that could be looked at in terms of other tools that could be used to more effectively manage Canada's freshwaters in future.
Okay, sorry, I'm just reading the next question here. Oh, it has to do with power boats. And sediment, you already answered that. Have you looked at the EU Water Directive as an example of a high-level policy that could be the basis for a Canadian water policy?
Yeah, we have. It's an interesting approach, and there've also been some looks at how it could be applied in Canada. It would be an aggressive approach in Canada, and I'm not sure that it fits well in our process, but I'd certainly be interested in people's thoughts on that.
Oh, this is Canada Water X. Sorry, I'm just trying to catch up on questions here. The Coalition for Responsible and Sustainable Navigation is conducting research. Oh, it's another motorboat one. Okay. Do you foresee the agency's mandate including research and development of guidelines and tools to improve water management practices, i.e. flood risk management across Canada?
Definitely a topic that, that comes up frequently. So definitely a topic that we'll want to consult on. And again, we just haven't made those decisions on roles and responsibilities.
Okay. That's a good one. It's exactly the opposite of what you're talking about here, but have you or others considered future federal governments being able to easily curtail or even shut down a Canada Water Agency once it's created?
Well, maybe that speaks to how it's structured. So I guess there is the potential to look at models where the agency would be somehow at arm's length to government. Right now, we are looking at other models. We talked about other models of agencies within the government of Canada. So Parks Canada is an agency, or we have other agencies within Canada, and they all report up through a minister to the Prime Minister. And so the government maintains control, and yes, they can create agencies, and they can also disband agencies if they're not successful models. We would hope to create a successful model that will be in place for many years to come.
Sorry, I'm just looking at the questions to see which ones you've sort of answered already. Oh, okay, here's a good one. So have there been any conversations around the funding model for the agency?
No, we haven't gotten there, to be honest. I mean, again, that will be a step in the process. What I can say is that as we've been talking about opportunities and roles for the agency, I think a number of commenters have commented on the need for increased investment in freshwater in a large number of areas. Definitely in science and data, but also governance, support to Indigenous people, and other areas. So that's a decision that's going to have to be made by cabinet when we bring forward the recommendations on creation of the agency.
All right, and then the last question I have here is: have provinces, I guess, and/or territories indicated support for such an agency?
So I can say that all provinces have indicated an interest in working with us. Almost all provinces and territories, I should say, have indicated an interest in working with us. Almost all provinces and territories have also indicated that they expect the government of Canada to be respectful of jurisdictional mandates and not encroach on the mandates of provincial and territorial governments. And my Minister of Environment and Climate Change has repeatedly made that statement that this agency is not intended to encroach on others' jurisdiction. It's looked at to be value added and collaborative in nature. So we will be engaging more fully with provinces and territories, and we're hoping that we can identify those areas where we can work together to improve freshwater management moving forward.
All right, it's about 5:02. I have no more questions. I think we answered most of the questions. If someone feels their question wasn't answered, they can re-ask it. Otherwise, I think the slide that's up right now is the PlaySpeak website with the 5 prompting questions. So I would encourage the attendees from the webinar to visit PlaySpeak, and you can consider these 5 questions here and register. I think you have to register for an account to be able to submit information, but I would encourage everybody to go there and either ask the same questions here, so they're documented on the site, or think of new questions and comments for input into the questions that are being posted at PlaySpeak.
Terrific, and then just put in a plug that we will be using PlaySpeak to publish that discussion paper when it's ready for release, and that paper will be communicated through normal channels in the coming months. So there'll definitely be an opportunity to provide more in-depth comments at that time.
Okay, sure. And I just got one last question. It's a repeat, so we'll ask it. We got a minute or two here. It says the Prime Minister recently endorsed the creation of Canada Water Agency with reference to the void left with closing the PFRA. A recent final report of the Great Lakes St. Lawrence Collaborative called for the creation of a multi-jurisdictional water quality and nutrient management center to support nutrient management through precision conservation and urban stormwater optimization. Would the Canada Water Agency contain such a water quality and nutrient management center? And if so, would this be coordinated with the provinces?
Boy, a bunch of ideas there. So one is that again, the mandate is a joint mandate to the Minister of Environment and Climate Change Canada and the Minister of Agriculture and Agri-Foods Canada, and that shows that there is an interest in ensuring that as we move forward on fresh water, we pay attention not solely to the agricultural sector, but recognize that is a particularly hard hit sector when it comes to fresh water in Canada. So there has been discussion from a number of people about the Prairie Farm Rehabilitation Administration that existed for almost a century and did a huge amount of work on the prairies in relation to freshwater management, and no longer exists. And so that's a topic that has come up as a potential gap. Some of the roles that the agency played in the past, and we'll look to discuss that further when we move forward with our engagement. In terms of nutrients, again, huge issue. We're seeing definitely in the Great Lakes, where I've spent a lot of my career, but also in other water bodies across the country. The ideas of centers of excellence to coordinate government and non-government, coordinate between federal, provincial, and territorial governments has come up in some of our initial engagement. We'll want to talk more about the benefits and the opportunities there as we move forward. I think in all of these issues, without exception, that the topic of how we do a better job of coordinating between federal, provincial, and territorial governments is going to come up. That we just have to use the resources we have available within government and external to government to maximum advantage, and that's definitely going to be a focus of this agency moving forward.
Okay, and the last question, I guess, is perfect. Can you please reiterate the expected timelines for the discussion paper?
So we are working as fast as we can. We are hopeful that we will get that discussion paper out later this calendar year, and that our engagement around it will be, likely for the standard 60 to 90 days. So it will, start this year and move into the early parts of next year. And then in terms of overall agency creation, I think the messaging is the same, that we're moving forward as quickly as we can to create the agency, but we also recognize that we have to allow sufficient time for engagement, so it's as soon as we can move through this rather complicated process. It's a big issue and lots of dimensions to it.
All right, then. It's 12 o'clock. It's the official end time for the webinar and question period. Perfect timing. I guess if people have further questions, Mike, do you want them just to go to the place speak, or is there some way? I guess everybody's going to get a copy of this presentation afterwards, but if people have additional questions, what do you suggest they do?
I think place speak would be a good way of coordinating those, and we'll try to get back to people.
Okay. All right, then with that, I'm going to end the presentation. I'd like to thank everybody for attending. We had almost 140 people at one point. We're still at 100. So thank you everybody for attending and participating on behalf of Cedar Brae, and thank you.